Why is a central bank bad? Why is it a bad idea? Okay, well, let's do a little bit of history just so that we're all up to speed. So anybody who already knows the history on this probably isn't for you. This is just an answer to a question that I got from somebody. If I could explain why I have such a problem that I do with central banking. And by the way, it isn't just my problem that I have with central banking. There's lots of other people that have a problem with central banking. So let me walk you through the thought process. The first bit is, let me give you sort of the positives, the theory behind central banking. The theory is that you're able to steer currency or money towards innovation that we kind of want. In other words, this is sort of the Alexander Hamilton idea, that if somebody has a good idea for something, like, oh, let's print a little extra money so that way we can funnel more funds into that idea and help that technology grow because it would benefit society to have that technology grow. Here's the challenge with that thinking. It's always instead of what. You have to think of it like that. Okay, you see a good idea, what you think is a good idea, and so you, the government, or whoever the central bank is, start funneling money there, thinking that, oh, this is a great way to go. What you're not seeing is the 10 or 12 other inventors that you've never heard of that are actually working on products or inventing things that are probably twice as efficient or better, and that the market, the natural market, the normal free market actually would go and support without government. They would just go support it because it's a good idea and it would be something that they could see a genuine benefit. Okay, so that's the first fundamental flaw in the idea behind central banking, is that you know better than what the market knows. What is the market? I've said it like 100 times. Like, what is the market? The market is just people. That's all a market is. It's anytime you hear somebody talk about the market, just sub in the word people. That's really what they're talking about. You know, anytime you hear somebody talk about the economy, just sub in the word people, because all an economy is just people engaging in commerce. That's really all it is. Like, these are fundamentals. These are not really, you don't have to have degrees to understand any of this. Like, this is really simple stuff. And it's stuff that I've taught for many years now. So the first fundamental flaw, the tragedy, is that it's always instead of what. You start funding something, but it may or may not have been the best direction to go. Okay, so that's the first problem. And then this is the Hamiltonian idea of central banking. This idea of, well, we can do things that'll benefit society, and it's like, it's a very altruistic way of thinking about it. But you're also forgetting that people are flawed. People are deeply flawed. And especially people who get into positions of power and they start getting too much of a buffer between them and reality. We talk about that a lot here on this channel. Once a person becomes so rich or famous or what have you, they start getting too detached from reality. And so what they start seeing as a good idea, it may or may not be a good idea compared to people that are actually on the ground that are actually doing all this stuff. It's sort of like the idea of a so-called safety department coming up with a bunch of safety gear that they themselves never use, but you want other people to use it because in theory it sounds good. But in practice, the safety gear, when people actually try to use it, it actually makes the job itself more unsafe. Anybody who's ever done blue-collar jobs will tell you that kind of thing does actually happen, sadly. And so that's kind of a good example of pointing that out. So you always have to ask yourself instead of what. Here's the theory, another theory behind central banking, which is that we can, have fewer booms and busts, right? So the market, there's a big boom in the market. And so instead of having a boom in the market, and then a bust, we want to try and level that off. So this was Keynes's theory. Keynes's idea was that when the private spending went down, then your government spending should go up inversely, so that way it would level things off. So you didn't have booms and busts. You didn't have this, these wild gyrations in the marketplace. Although I make the case that you actually those are actually healthy. Those wild gyrations, those are actually healthy. That's the market being alive, and the market itself, remember, the people, is picking winners and losers. The market's picking that, not the government, not central bankers, not professors at colleges, not, you know what I mean? Like not oligarchs that are picking all this. It's the market itself that is selecting that and choosing where they put their money, their energy, in other words, okay? So Keynes's idea, though, was that you would level things off. The problem is government spending never goes down. There's this one-way ratcheting up of reality. The theory being, this is my commie follower theory, is that, well, we can do that, man, but then, you know, we just have to have better people that we vote for. That is not a thing. There is no such thing as better people that you will ever vote for in the history of this. Like, this is not going to happen. Because remember, it's very subtle. People, once they start becoming a little richer, a little more famous, they start losing touch, and they may or may not know what's going on in the real world. And that's where, again, this is where mass psychosis comes from, right? Again, we've talked about this a lot here. It's very subtle. It doesn't seem like it would happen, but it does, because people are fallible. People are susceptible to all kinds of temptations around them. You're tempted constantly. The temptation also for central banking, which is ever present, which is just to say, well, you know, we could use a little more money over here and nobody will notice it. So let's just print a little more money over here and then fund this or bail this out. Here's this employer. This employer has 100,000 or 200,000 people that work for him. And if he goes under, he's going to lose all these employees, and then there's going to be this huge amount of unemployment. We don't want to have that. So let's just kind of tilt the scale and print a little more money and then have a few government contracts that company can get that nobody else can get, and that'll bail this company out to save these 200,000 jobs. It sounds good on the surface because, oh, well, you're saving 200,000 jobs. No, what you're doing is you're perpetuating 200,000 lies. That's what's happened. Well, what should happen? Well, what would happen is that company would go out of business. And then those 200,000 people who know what they're doing would probably buy up all those assets in that company or buy up a good chunk of the assets. In other words, the people who actually know what they're doing and how to run the company would buy up all the assets. And then they start running smaller businesses. Smaller businesses isn't a bad idea. This is where you have, so this is where you get into the idea of who owns the means of production kind of thing. Gravity's a little strong right there. Who owns the means of production kind of thing? Well, instead of having the idea of the so-called people, right, the government owns all the means of production, and so therefore the people are all taken care of. This is that typical, very typical communist, leftist type socialist view of things, national socialist view of things, where again, it's always, well, we can elect good people. No, you cannot. Stop thinking like that. That's retarded. There's no such thing as electing good people. You can elect okay people, at best. At best. Maybe people who don't have an agenda. Maybe you can get away with it once or twice, but eventually, sooner or later, no matter how altruistic of a person that you find to elect, you will eventually just, I mean, like how many benevolent rulers have there been in history of mankind? Like 20? I mean, come on, right? Out of like tens of thousands of despots? Okay, so that's how you have to think about it like that. You have to think of it in those terms. So no, you leave the market alone, and then the people own their means of production, but they own it directly, not through the government, not indirectly through a government. Because once again, once you put people in positions of government, now you're back to having people who are detached from everybody else. They have no more profit incentive. They have no more incentive to do anything that is public facing because they're now above the law, which you don't want. So you get anacyclosis. Anacyclosis, you know, look up anacyclosis, but you end up with that again. So you will always end up with these problems whenever you have central banking. If it has a central bank, you will inevitably be right back here every single time, every time. You have to have a currency or a unit of measurement that is outside of government, outside of politics, outside of oligarchs, outside of all of that. You have to have a currency or a unit of measurement that doesn't adhere to any of that. That's where physical gold came from for the longest time. Physical gold was people saying, that's it. You either have to have the money to pay me or you don't. That's it. Physical gold operates like this. And there's other currencies now, but I'm using physical gold because people understand it. It either weighs or it doesn't. It's pure or it's not. You have it or you don't. That's it. That's it. And if you're paying for something in physical gold, well, then it doesn't leave any room for you to print a bunch of money to bail stuff out. Does that make sense?